I want to talk about expectations. Like if you read the title of this video and looked at the thumbnail, you're expecting a video talking about the Latitude 64 Brave and the Loft Titanium. And if you've seen our videos, you're expecting me to say, hey everyone, it's Greg from Six Sided Discs, and then probably start talking about how flight numbers don't matter or something like that. And they don't. But frankly, this is why they don't. Expectations. Let me show you what I mean. If I sold you this disc and I said it's going to be an overstable fairway driver, and it flew like this, it met expectations. No turn, lots of fade, everyone's happy. But if I said this disc was going to be overstable and it flew like this, instant bummer. And what is it about most discs that give people expectations? Flight numbers. However, flight numbers are super complicated. Every company makes up their own. And how do they choose how they pick those flight numbers? No one knows. Are the numbers for pros or amateurs? Are they for high RPM throws or low? And then of course they make that disc in 10 different plastics and different stability for each of them. Now I'm not trying to bash flight numbers, though you may not believe me. It is an imperfect system, but it's the one we've got. But let's get back to expectations by looking at two fairway drivers. When you see -1 turn and 2 fade on a disc, what do you think of? Just take a second and imagine that flight. -1 turn and 2 fade. What does it look like? You're probably seeing a disc that gets a little turn before slowly but gently fading out. Probably a slight S curve to the flight, right? Now, if I'm wrong and that's not what you see, leave a comment down below. I want to know what you think that flight looks like. Now, what about a disc with the flight numbers of -2 turn and 1 fade? What does that look like to you? Some more turn? Maybe a straight finish toward the end? Again, I'm curious. To understand why these expectations are important, let's take a look at these two discs, the Loft Titanium and the Latitude 64 Brave. At first, they don't look all that similar, apart from being the same color, which is also the best color. On paper, they look a lot more similar because their PDGA specifications are nearly identical. Diameter, same. Rim depth, same. Inside rim diameter, only 1 millimeter different. Rim thickness, 1 millimeter different. But thankfully, disc golf isn't played on paper. The big difference between these two discs is felt immediately when you put them in your hand. The Brave feels a lot bigger, or maybe it's just a normal size because the Titanium feels super shallow by comparison. And I point this out not just because it's noticeable to me, but I imagine there's people out there who get frustrated when they shop for a disc online, think they've chosen the perfect one, only to find out it doesn't fit their hand. For example, I know most 13-speed discs just don't fit my backhand grip, and it would be a bummer to find out that a 12-speed disc from one company is actually the same rim thickness as most 13 speeds. Anyways, back to these two. Now you're probably wondering why we're even comparing them together, but I already told you. Expectations. Let's start with the Titanium. The Loft Discs Titanium released in Loft's latest Kickstarter campaign, alongside the wild approach disc Neon that we checked out a few months back. The Titanium is the first understable disc in their lineup, after the high-speed Boreum, Firebird-esque Xenon, beefy silicon mid-range, and super neutral hydrogen putter. Now, once again for me, picture that flight, -2 turn and 1 fade, and see if this looks about right. I don't know about you, but this meets my expectations. And I'm delighted because typically a -2 turn, 1 fade disc in premium plastic doesn't get this much turn when I throw it. Now though, let's compare that to the Latitude 64 Brave. The Brave, rated at 7.5 -1.2, is one of the latest additions to the growing Royal line from Latitude 64. The Royal line has had mixed success so far. The Grace has been a runaway success, thanks in no part to Kristen Tatar throwing it all the time. We, like many other shops, can barely keep it in stock. But other discs have struggled to take off, like the Glory, Trust, Faith, and Hope, which haven't sold nearly as well for us. Though the 9-speed Honor and 13-speed Rive both have a loyal following. But that's enough backstory on the Brave to tell us where it comes from and why we should probably expect it to at least fly like it says it will. So once again, picture for me, -1 turn, 2 fade, and let's take a look. Are you seeing it? No? Now you might be thinking maybe it's really understable for Caleb because he's all big and strong and whatnot. What if I throw it? No, that still doesn't look like -1 turn and 2 fade to me. So it looks like you might need to be pretty brave to throw the brave. But I have a theory on why it might fly the way it does. To demonstrate that theory, we need to go back and look at some clips from our Comparing Every Trilogy plastic video. In that video, we threw the Dynamic Discs Escape in 3 different plastics. And I mentioned the Escape because it has a very similar wing shape, hand feel, and overall design to the Brave. Now, in the older plastic blends of Lucid and Lucid Glimmer, the Escape flew great. Straight to slightly overstable and pretty close to what we would expect from -1 turn and 2 fade. But we also tested a third Escape, the Supreme Escape. And as it turns out, it was a little bit different. Now, you might be confused why I'm talking about dynamic discs when this is a Latitude 64 disc, so let me quickly explain the connective tissue between these companies. Dynamic Discs, Latitude 64, and Westside Discs have all had a handshake agreement going for years now, where Dynamic distributes all the discs in the United States, while Latitude 64 makes the discs in Sweden. Most recently, House of Discs was formed by a venture capitalist firm called Bendis Capital, who has since purchased Discmania, Castoplast, and Hand-Eye Supply Company. They are all now under the same ownership scheme, and Dynamic Supreme Line is their version of Latitude 64's Royal Line, using the same technology, plastic, etc., but of course, different branding. This means that it is not unusual for a Royal Line disc to fly just like a Supreme Line disc, especially if they have very similar designs. Okay, so basically, is the Brave just a slower version of the Escape in the same plastic? And if so, is that why it flies the same? You be the judge. Yeah, so I'm having flashbacks here. The Supreme Escape is rated at -1.2 and is super understable and goes super far. The Grand Brave from the Royal Line is also rated at -1.2 and is super understable instead, and also goes super far. Now, to be clear, I have no problem with the disc flying like this, but I do find it frustrating as a disc golf shop owner who goes out and tries to sell people discs and talk to them about discs. When someone wants to buy an understable disc and I try to explain to them why the Escape or Brave is perfect in that plastic, they don't necessarily understand. Or on the flip side, someone wants a disc that might fly like an Undertaker or a CD1, whatever, and maybe they're looking at the Escape, and I have to try and explain to them why it's not the right disc for them. Expectations. So the Loft Discs Titanium is an excellent hyzer flip to understable fairway driver. And the Latitude 64 Brave was also an excellent hyzer flip to understable fairway driver. So maybe next time you're shopping for one, you'll have more realistic expectations. Comment below what discs you've thrown that perfectly met expectations, and which ones didn't. For Six Sided Discs, I'm Greg. We'll see you in the next one. Last year we went to the Disc Golf Pro Tour for the first time, and set up our pop-up shop in the vendor area at the LWS Open at Idlewild. This August, we're coming back, and this time we're more prepared. If you're one of the first 100 people to come up to our tent and say hello, and show us that you're subscribed to our YouTube channel, you will receive one of these, our Six Sided Discs Velcro patch for free. And I want to say a big shout out and thanks to discgolfpins.com for making these for us. They turned out fantastic. So if you're ever in need of a pin or patch or anything else about disc golf, head over to discgolfpins.com. Not a sponsor. And of course, we'll see you at Idlewild. And if you've seen our videos right about now, you're expecting me to say something like, oh, the Loft Titanium and the Latitude 64 mute. That would be to demonstrate. Wow, okay, come on. However, flight numbers are super complicated. Every company makes up their own. How do they decide how they choose them? Who?
There we go. How's your flip? All right.
If you like this content and want to see more, please consider liking the video, subscribing to our channel, or supporting us on Patreon. Your support makes this content possible.